Hello and welcome to Changemakers. In this show, we have interesting conversations with people who are making a change, making an impact, making a difference. Our guest today is Stacey Lawson, an entrepreneur, educator, speaker, and a co-founder of the Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology at the University of California, Berkeley. Stacey Lawson, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Gopi. I'm glad we could make it happen.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
So in reading about your background, all the things you've done, your life story is like a book with this very, very rich and descriptive chapters. There are many different aspects that you've touched. And I'm just curious at the start itself, how did you build such a varied and interesting aspects of life? How did you put it all together?
Well, there's so many aspects of life that are interesting to learn about and to be part of. So I started my career in the technology space, and I've run 3 different technology businesses, one a very early stage entrepreneurial venture and sort of growing from there. And that was such a fun time in the creative process of building something from nothing and really bringing forth the creative energies of a team of people. It was so fascinating and inspiring and engaging that I decided I'd like to help lots of entrepreneurs do the same thing. So I co-founded the Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology at Berkeley, and we educate young entrepreneurs on how to commercialize new technologies, how to build businesses, create jobs, compete in the global marketplace. So it's just a tremendously thrilling opportunity to be part of an ecosystem that can support a larger scale of young entrepreneurs coming into the world. And I then took that into the social enterprise and social entrepreneurship space, and I'm involved with organizations that are using entrepreneurial processes, community organizing, community engagement, social impact to make change in our world. Yeah. So to do good either by the environment, by communities of people who need help, to serve those that are maybe underprivileged, and to do that through a set of processes and actions that are very entrepreneurial in nature. So I think that's probably what kind of weaves the thread through my story, which is how to help people create that which is very fulfilling and nurturing and supportive of the communities that they're part of.
Yeah, but the words that I picked up in reading about you, as well as in your brief conversation, is help and social impact. Mm-hmm. So as an entrepreneur, you have many different directions you could go. You could build huge enterprises, which might be a boost to your ego, or focus on generating a lot of wealth, and nothing wrong with that. But instead of those paths, the thing that seems to have called out most is help other entrepreneurs and see how you could have a social impact. So what drove you in those directions?
I think the concept of servant leadership is one that is a very much a guiding principle, and I feel it's something that needs to be birthed a little bit more in our society. That we have many fabulous leaders, and we probably have fewer servants. And I think servant leadership is a concept that's really about putting the service orientation first. When we lead with a desire to truly care for and to be in service to our community, our family, our broader society, in some way to help make the world a better place than where we found it. And I think that's probably I know for me it's a guiding principle and something that I hope is embodied in the various activities and projects that I do. I think that there are many aspects of our culture where our egos and our sort of maybe more self-serving tendencies tend to drive the dynamics in those spaces. And I think it's really important that as we kind of face many of the challenges and the social and environmental and political and other issues in our world today, that the solutions will only come from a place where we're all collectively bringing forth a sort of collective intelligence together. Mm-hmm. And that requires there to be a lot more listening and a lot less talking. And I think the notion of service and servant leadership is one that will help us bring forward the deeper inner voice, the voice of the many, the voice of the collective, the voice of wisdom that resides in all of us, but may not be yet quite tapped in terms of us bringing forward innovative solutions to solve the problems of our day. So something that's very, very important in my life, I think.
Okay, so let's go back to this concept of servant leadership. It seems almost like an oxymoronish term to me. Servants are often not seen as leaders, and leaders may not be necessarily servants. But you seem to have found that the two can coexist together, actually take you to a better state of leadership. So how have you practiced or lived those values in everything you've done?
Well, and I'm certainly not the only one aspiring to servant leadership.
Sure.
I know there are many fabulous leaders, and in fact, I've had the opportunity to work with many of them in the young companies that I help steward and guide and advise. One of the areas where I've been working recently has been in Southeast Asia and India with an organization called Tripura Foundation that is going into very underprivileged communities, in the urban poor or the rural poor, where people are living in just really abject poverty and terrible conditions, and actually engaging the communities to help them bring themselves up and step out of poverty. Yeah. So, and what I've learned is that you can't go into a community anywhere and tell them what they need to do. Yeah. You need to listen to what they need.
Absolutely.
And help them accomplish that. So I think part of the notion of servant leadership is actually bringing to bear one's skills and energies and intention to actually help care for and help deliver solutions to the needs of the community that you're in. Yeah. So we actually engage these underserved communities in helping us together build clusters of 30 to 100 new homes at a time. So we build housing together. We provide we provide food and shelter, a safe place to live. And then we work on things like skills building and livelihood training and working with local small business or cottage industry so that as people sort of develop their skill sets, they actually have a place to put that to work. Yeah. And the local business then gets access to skilled workforce that they might not have had otherwise. So it's a way of sort of mutually uplifting all of the participants in the community. Yeah. And doing that in environmentally friendly ways, making sure that we're reducing crime. As the poverty levels go down, the crime rates also go down, which helps for safe, healthy families. Nice. We provide education. We have now over 6 education centers and 2 residential facilities for girls and boys who are underserved. And by giving kids
all of this in southern India?
In the Philippines and in India.
Philippines, India. Okay.
But it's just one example of how working together and how by listening to the voices of what's needed and bringing best practices to bear, but doing it in a collaborative way, can bring people to a better place together. Yeah.
So how did you make that leap? And by leap, I mean both the action as well as the decision, where you made the choice saying, rather than invest my time as an entrepreneur building businesses, which is for the first part of your career, to this activity with the Tripura Foundation, where a good deal of your life energy is going towards this kind of work. Usually people stay in one or the other, with the exception of a few people like maybe Bill Gates.
And he's doing great work.
He's doing great work and has done in both dimensions,
Well, it's perhaps a little bit longer story. I mean, maybe I'll tell a bit about my early days. So
sure.
I had the classic entrepreneur story. I grew up in a small town. My father was a small businessman. He owned a regional trucking company. He grew that from his first dump truck, and he bought a second one, and he sort of bootstrapped his way up. So I think a lot of the entrepreneurial
the traditions were there, the genes,
the hard work and the sort of go-getter attitude came from my father. I had the opportunity later to go on to business school. I went to business school at Harvard, and while I was there, I had a class where I had to write a business plan. Wasn't planning on starting a company from that, but as it turned out, this idea took hold. And I hear this a lot from entrepreneurs when the idea is burning in the belly, and you can't let it go. You can't walk away from it. Yeah. You just have to proceed. And so out of business school, I didn't interview for any jobs. I put the recruiting to the side as I was a little afraid that I might lose my nerve. Yeah. So I left business school with $80,000 in debt, no car, no job, no home, no income. And I called a friend in Silicon Valley and said, can I sleep on your couch for a little while, and I'm going to try to make a company. And so I walked up and down, or drove up and down Sand Hill Road with my business plan, knocked on the doors of the VCs, and ultimately got funded. So it was one of those endeavors where it was risky. I thought maybe I was a little crazy, actually. I didn't know what I didn't know, and I had virtually no business experience.
Yes.
So, but it worked out, and I managed to get funded and grew that organization. And we were acquired several years later by a larger public technology company, a software company. And I went on to grow a very large public enterprise. So I had thousands of employees working as I was. My company was acquired, and they were looking to do a bit of a turnaround, and I helped sort of spearhead that. And I did that for several different businesses. And there came a point in time where I was sitting in the corporate boardroom, and I had a vision. I mean, I was literally there with all of our board members and public company CEO, and we were having intense conversations about how to grow the business and deal with the market dynamics and so forth. And in that vision, I saw this cascading series of quarter ends and reports to Wall Street and sort of an unending set of years that would be sort of doing the same type of thing. And I thought, that's actually not what this life is about. It's not what will fulfill me. That's not what I came here to do. What I came here to do is to actually serve in this world and to use these skill sets and talents and experiences that I've had to help as many people as possible in whatever way that might be. So I decided to leave the corporate world, and that's when I founded the center at Berkeley and went more into the realm of social enterprise with an eye towards using the enthusiasm and the experience that I'd had in this sort of creative process of building new organizations to help others create jobs, to help create a foundation ecosystem within the Bay Area here for many to be successful in the commercial and innovation space.
So the one thing that strikes me about all of this, Stacy, is that there is a different kind of inner music that seems to be working in your head, heart, or mind that makes you go a little bit against the grain or follow a different path, and it seems to be repeating. At Harvard Business School, you could have gone to work on Wall Street or with a big consulting firm, but you decided to go sleep on a friend's couch and start a company. And while you're in the boardroom, you could have been a senior corporate executive in a public software company for many, many years. Instead, you chose to go do something else. And rather than be a serial entrepreneur, you said, let me help other people become entrepreneurs. So where do you think that slightly different lens by which you view the world is coming from? What triggers that?
That's a good question. I'm not sure I've been asked that in quite that way before. I'll tell a story.
There's a different frequency in your mind is what I'm saying.
I'm on the board of an organization that was founded by Edgar Mitchell, the Apollo 14 astronaut. And the organization is called the Institute of Noetic Sciences, and it studies the nature of human potential and of human consciousness. And Edgar founded the organization because on his return from the moon, and remember, he was on a mission that took place right after Apollo 13, where his colleagues almost didn't return.
Correct.
And so imagine the amount of surrender and courage and sort of internal fortitude and service that was in his mind as he was getting into that craft and lifting off when he knew he may never return. And there was a close call that was just, not too much earlier than that. And they had a successful mission. They walked on the moon, and on the way home, he was in charge of all of the science and sample gathering on the moon. So a lot of his duties were completed by the time they were returning, other than, of course, steering the craft and so forth. And he had the opportunity to spend some moments just gazing out the window. And the craft was doing a 360-degree... Gazing
out of the window, not just any window in a spacecraft around the moon. Okay.
But the craft was in a 360-degree spin. So every 2 minutes he would see in his field of rotation the sun, the moon, and the earth, and it would just keep rotating. And he said that in that time he had a profound experience that every molecule in his body had been birthed in an ancient system of stars and were the same molecules that were making up the molecules of his spacecraft, of the Earth that he was seeing, of the entire cosmos. And he was seeing the Earth from a perspective of wholeness, of complete interconnectedness. To think that he was an American or Chinese or Russian was sort of absurd. He was a human, and he was part of this vast interconnected cosmos that was seeing the Earth from a distance. And so I think that understanding, that innate, intuitive knowing of our interconnectedness actually exists within all of us. That when we serve, we're actually serving the oneness or the sort of unity that exists within all of us. And that it's easy to forget that in our busy modern day.
All the time, yes.
We have so many problems. I mean, look at what we're doing with the environment and, you know, with our social systems and our political systems. There's a lot of trouble. And there's, you know, you can't be Pollyanna about that. I mean, there's very clear and imminent challenges and dangers that are facing mankind.
Absolutely.
But underneath that still lies the truth that we're deeply interconnected and we have a deep intelligence that runs within us that is the source of all of the solutions to those problems. So it is absolutely critical. It's not just, you know, being kind-hearted. It's absolutely critical that we actually tap into a deeper level of engaged service, because that is the space from which we will actually identify the solutions that we need to survive and thrive and to have prosperity for all people, not, you know, not the disparities that we see now, but to have a prosperous world. And so I think it comes from an inner sense of that interconnectedness and a deep belief, conviction that that service is absolutely necessary. And the more of us who step into it, the more likely it is we will solve the problems of our day in time to ensure the future prosperity of our children and our children's children.
Wow, that was fascinating. I didn't want to interrupt because there was like a beautiful train of thought there. So I want to come back to this concept of servant leadership and public leadership. But before that, you touched a few times on this quality of listening and tapping into an inner wisdom and being aware of a higher consciousness. And those don't seem to be the kind of things that they teach at Harvard Business School or when you're an entrepreneur on the board of a public software company. What is the source of that kind of thinking? Is there like an inner work or practice that leads you to reflect and come to those conclusions?
Well, I'm a person full of faith, and I do believe that that each of our individual explorations around our own faith is very important. I'm very, very grateful to live in a country that supports and sort of encourages the melting pot that we have, and where we tolerate and embrace the many, many faiths and cultures and races that are part of our society. For me, I've always been a student of many different religious and mystical traditions. I find them fascinating. And I'm also a longtime meditator. So I think that it's important for us to be tapping into a deeper silent space. I mean, whether that for you is prayer, or it's contemplation, maybe it's yoga, maybe it's meditation, maybe it's taking a run on the beach, enjoying nature, enjoying your family. I mean, I think for everyone there's a different way that expresses itself. But that it is the source, it's like the internal fuel. It's the place from which we actually know our deeper truth. And that's an important quality for, again, you know, not only for living a happy life, but for being a contributing participant to building a better world. So for me, it comes from a deep personal inquiry and contemplation and silence.
I see. Now, all of that makes enormous sense, except for one, which is in this extremely busy and varied life that you have chosen. How do you find the time and ritualize these practices of inner work or tuning in? I think most people struggle with that one fact in their one life, and you seem to have like 10 lives overlaid on top of each other. So where do you find the time to go into that silence and go into a retreat space or meditate?
Well, quite frankly, actually, when we source our actions from that place,
Yeah.
I think a lot of the inessential falls away. So, and the creative process becomes much more dynamic and kind of in the flow. Mm-hmm. So it's not to say that I experience that all the time, but I think the benefit of having a contemplative practice, whether that's prayer, meditation, whatever it might be, is that we actually find life becomes a lot easier. Yeah. And it doesn't take a lot. I mean, I mean, in terms of like a daily practice, taking 10 minutes or 20 minutes or half an hour a day to breathe deeply, to be still, to go into silence, can actually give us a reservoir of energy and ideas and creativity that is surprising. I think you have a personal practice as well, so you know this. And then that informs our leadership. Then we can listen more easily, and we can synthesize information more easily, I find, and find the kernels of truth and the kernels of potential solutions in a sort of harried, busy, hectic day more easily and more quickly.
Okay, so it sounds like the formula is invest those 20 minutes to have a real positive impact on the other 2,000.
Well, okay, not exactly. I believe that our daily life is our meditation, too.
Okay, so you're saying the entire 2,000.
Invest the 20 minutes because it will be a deep informing source. But also move through your life in a mindset of service, and then you're always in meditation.
That is right, yeah. Why stop with the 20 or on the cushion?
Right. And I think that goes back to the listening part, which is when we listen really carefully to other people, when we listen really carefully to what's being said, what's needed, when we go below some of the conflict or emotional content of our media and of our public discourse and of even our personal dialogues, we're all very, we all want sort of the deeper meaning. We all seek happiness. We all seek some connection. I think when we get agitated, that that comes forth, and we're seeing it in many sort of harsh ways, particularly in our media, and particularly in our political environment. But that if we bring some presence into our day, and we try to sort of not just do that in the moments where we have quiet time or with family, but we do that in our careers, and we do that in our schools, and we do that in the marketplace, and that's an intention and an approach that would really serve us as a society. So more people that are doing that, the more healthy I think we'll all be.
Yeah, extremely well said. So if I go back to that concept of public leadership and having an impact, in general, a lot of people seem to be drawn to the field of public service or public institutions or political institutions for a couple of reasons, because you can have a big impact on a huge number of people, given the nature of those institutions, and also that seems to be one area ripe for lots of problem solving and fixing, especially in this country. And is that something that you've considered or have been drawn towards?
Absolutely. So, one of the things that was always or has always been somewhat troubling, even in the fabulous work, for instance, that we're doing in India and Southeast Asia, and the work with these communities, is that there's no one organization that will ever be able to fully solve the problem. It's really a collective kind of effort. And so we've been doing a lot of work as it relates to bringing together governments, NGOs, local business, the community leaders, the families themselves into a collective dialogue. And that kind of synergy will certainly be, I think, more productive in terms of us getting to solutions to end poverty, to lift our poorest out of their current conditions, to address climate change and environmental issues, to address economic challenges that we have right now. But quite frankly, I think our political environment, we will need to solve these things at a systemic level. It will require smart policy and more systems thinking, and our politics is going to be really, really key to that. And right now, as we've been watching in Washington,
absolutely, with horror,
with with horror. I think many of our leaders have unfortunately lost the perspective of that they have been put into office to be stewards and to be caretakers and trustees of the corporate good.
Truly.
So not corporate.
Political good, public good.
The public good, excuse
Yes.
me. They are trustees of the collective good, and that their job is to find solutions that work for as many people as possible. And what I unfortunately see is that right now it appears as though many of them are just maneuvering for small political gains and how to win the next election or make sure the other guy doesn't win the next election. And that's not going to get us very far. So I do think it will take a new phase of more honorable or more enlightened, more servant-oriented leadership to transform our politics. I think it's possible. I myself even am considering sort of moving in that direction. And I also think that it's essential. So I hope that there'll be young, bright, innovative, and skilled
solutions in that area.
People to move in that way.
We got about a minute to wind down from the show, and I just wanted to, for our listeners, again, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about if they want to bring up this concept of public servant leadership as well as listening to your inner voice and guidance. What sort of wisdom would you leave them with at the end of the show?
Listen. Yeah, I think that it's about putting the servant part of servant leadership first. I think we have, like I said earlier, wonderful leaders within our communities, and to the extent that they can move into the mode of truly being in service, to truly listening, that they will in fact then be even more effective at bringing forth the solutions that are required to bring about a better world and a better life for all of us. So I encourage.
Thank you, Stacey. That is amazing. On that note, we'll wrap up the show. Our guest today has been Stacey Lawson, an entrepreneur, speaker, educator, and co-founder of the Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology at the University of California, Berkeley. Stacey, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you.